All right, so we are getting started, and yeah, we'll see if anybody joins us. So far, it's just me and Craig today, and yeah, I was really enjoying last week's conversation. Had some good conversation going in here, so appreciated that. And we left off with the Buddha's autobiography. And yeah, I didn't get very far in the reading last time because we had such great fun with the conversation, I think, or at least I did. So I'm going to see if I can make a little bit more headway today. And so we're starting on page 66. And the instructions to Rahula, and again, my apologies if I got that wrong. So forgive me. The role of admirable friendship in promoting the supplementary factors of the path is well illustrated in the Buddha's instructions to his son, when, according to the commentary, the latter was only 7 years old. Of the various supplementary factors we have been discussing, only Samvega doesn't enter into the discussion, perhaps because it would have been inappropriate for a child of Rahula's age, or perhaps because of Rahula's personality in general. The Vinaya tells us that one of the reasons Rahula ordained as a young novice was that he liked being near his father. The instructions in Sutta 45 show how the Buddha made use of this emotional connection to spur Rahula on the path. Ooh, wow. Interesting. You know, I have zippo knowledge of the relationship between Buddha and his son. This is really, really interesting to me. I have definitely, as a Westerner, again, I've read all different kinds of Western accounts and lots of strong feelings about the Buddha's historical relationship to his son. So this is really, really interesting. And wow, almost sounds Machiavellian, doesn't it? He leveraged those emotions to, but I shall read on. In Sutta 45, the Buddha's most obvious role as admirable friend is as instructor, telling Rahula how to develop the supplementary factors in practice. In essence, he is showing Rahula how to develop the qualities that he elsewhere said he looked for in a student: truthfulness and powers of observation. So I'm really enjoying this. This might potentially be a really inflammatory thing to say, given where I live. I don't know anymore, okay? I don't know anymore. I live in the United States. This idea of the admirable friend. Notice that, you know, the term father isn't used here. And I find that really, really interesting. That Buddha served as an admirable friend. You know, so if you go back and look at the supplementary external factors. So I just find that an absolutely delightful relationship to be an absolutely delightful relationship to your child. First of all, you're modeling behavior. But also, you know, when I think about if I were to go back and I were to look at those external factors and think about what is the role of an admirable friend, you know, going back again and looking at previous sections, how compassionate, how spacious, how not micromanagey. You know what I mean? All right, so yeah, I'm gonna read on here a little bit. The Buddha's instructions fall into two lines of questioning. The first focuses on the issue of truthfulness, making the point that one's quality as a contemplative, devoted to the training of the mind, depends on being truthful, feeling a sense of shame at the idea of telling a lie, and as a result, not telling a lie, even in jest. Wow, look at this. So really, I consider Rahula to be very, very lucky because, you know, what psychology knows about the Homo sapien brain, you know, is that those formative years, that 1 through 5, is so critical to human formation. And even though, you know, neuroscience does show us and tell us that the brain is elastic, it's not easy. As we get older, it actually gets much harder. You know, so I think this is really, really great that, once again, notice the Buddha's instructions fall into two lines of questioning. And again, think about how the Pāli Canon is set up here, right? In a way, it kind of makes me wonder, you know, was Socrates exposed to Buddhism? Because in a way, that's exactly what he's doing here. And it's also what he's doing with his son, right? We have two different, hi, hello, welcome. he was training him in 2 lines of questioning. And much like the Pāli Canon, and I was just commenting that I wonder how much exposure Socrates had to Buddha, because the Pāli Canon also is, asking questions. You tell me. I don't know. What do you think? You tell me. And so here it's talking about how, the Buddha's instructions to his son fall into 2 lines of questioning. The first focuses on the issue of truthfulness, making the point that one's quality as a contemplative devoted to the training of the mind depends on being truthful. And again, this is an earlier section. If you are following the podcast, I think it was in last weekend, also in the week before that, but also maybe 3 or 4 pages ahead of this. Devoted to the training of the mind depends on being truthful, feeling a sense of shame at the idea of telling a lie, and as a result, not telling a lie, even in jest. And this is something I really love about Buddhism, and I talk about a lot in this book club. Oh, great! Hey, great! Okay, yes, yeah. I'm glad you're here. One of the things I love about Buddhism here, is you won't hear words like right, wrong, good, bad. There's very much a very kind of practical aspect to it. It's more of like, is it skillful or is it unskillful? Why do Buddhists meditate on their own death, or how disgusting the body is? And so you can go back and listen to that last episode, or just read earlier in the book. And it doesn't really, in the book, explains, why, but if you want to hear what I have to say about it, yeah, it's in the last episode. But this idea that, when you do these meditations, when you actually do this for yourself, I know it sounds morbid, but you meditate on your death, even as a little kid. I came into Buddhism at 21. I don't know if you should be having your kid meditate on death. I really don't. I'm not even going to suggest such a thing. But I am wondering here, because I think a really big distinction in Buddhism is that we don't feel shame. I think it's more about, as you practice, the feelings that arise when we're not skillful almost act as a buffer against unskillful behavior. I don't know if that makes any sense. So yeah, I'm just really curious. I want to know more. I want to know more about Buddha's relationship to his son. This quality of truthfulness then provides the foundation for the second line of questioning, which show how to develop one's power of observation. Look at that. If I just would have read ahead. Yeah, how marvelous. How marvelous to be able to get exposed to working with the mind from a really young age. And being able to learn that skill and then to continue to cultivate that skill as you grow up just sounds remarkable to me. And how wonderful, how fantastic. Yeah, right. It's like, oh my gosh, I admit it. I'm a little jello here. I'm not going to lie. So Rahula will have to be truthful to himself. We were just talking about this maybe 2 episodes ago. So if you read maybe page 63-ish, where Bhikkhu's kind of, talking about, because we're not in the suttas right now, and you'll kind of see how the book is lined out. The suttas come at the end of each chapter. But he talks about how, why truthfulness? Why did the Buddha, when he was thinking about who he wanted for his pupils, and there were certain, he's talking here in the book about, there were certain qualities that the Buddha would look for in his students when he was alive and he was actively teaching. And one of those things was truthfulness. And then, if you kind of get in a little bit to what his definition of truthfulness is, it's just radical and fantastic. And so I have to assume here that that's what he's referring to here. Rahula will have to be truthful to himself. So again, see earlier sections. This is really radical here. Rahula will have to be truthful to himself in observing his actions. Boom! So in other words, hey, son, notice the cause and effect of your behavior and the ramifications of your actions. We're going to train in noticing that our actions have reactions. That's really radical. I mean, I think if every parent had the parenting skills, let's start now, right? If you're going to breed, let's start now. Let's start teaching our kids. Let's teach ourselves that, so we can teach our kids that from a really early age. That you can actually go inside and you can observe your own mind and you yourself, through practical application, will see for yourself what feels good in the body. And I just think that's absolutely phenomenal, just radical. So I get a little passionate, can you tell? Okay. Anywho, yep. And particularly his mistakes, yes. And truthful to his teacher or another fellow contemplative in asking for the counsel when he observes that he has committed a mistake in word or deed. Last week, I realized last week I was talking about this, and I actually talk about it quite a bit, that sometimes, and again, this is no judgment. I live in the United States. My intersectionality, or in Buddhism, what is called fabrication, fabricated state, is that I live in the United States. And so, I think that what might be an easy reach for people that are Western, particularly if you're maybe coming from maybe Christianity, or if anyone's ever done a 12-step program, and maybe is coming to Buddhism from that, because sometimes there's a natural, people will oftentimes look to, a faith tradition to help them with their sobriety. And I think an easy reach for things like that, in relationship to, putting it into the lens of a Buddhist view, is that, once again, this idea of truthfulness. He talks about this idea of, first, if we can't be truthful to ourselves, I'm kind of phasing this from last week, but what he says is, if we can't be truthful to ourselves, this is the first part, if we can't be truthful to ourselves, then we can't be truthful to another. So the way that I interpret that, and what I was explaining last week, because I do come from Buddhism via my addiction and wanting to put in my case, I no longer work the 12 steps. I now just, Buddhism is my path. No judgment, that was my choice and my path. So putting it into that perspective, and you could say that sometimes we don't realize that we have a problem until we say it out loud to someone else. Or sometimes we can't even say it out loud to someone else, right, until we know that we have the problem. It's just kind of this weird kind of paradox. So anyway, I'm just rambling on and on. But yeah, truthfulness is pretty exciting to my view, in the ways that the Buddha talks about it. Feel free to chat away, and I will periodically jump back in. And it's so complicated. Oh my goodness. The Buddha recommends to Rahula that he sharpen his powers of observation by applying appropriate attention to his actions, beginning with the stage when he is intending to act. Then while he is acting, and finally when the action is done. Okay, this is so great. This to me is one of those things here that I think is why there are pretty much 3 stones in the Eightfold Path purely dedicated to different kinds of meditation experiences. Sharpen his powers of observation. I mean, it sounds like a really simple throwaway concept, but it's not, right? Like when you really get into the Pāli Canon, you really start to get into the different kinds of rights, right effort. And then when you think about concepts like Vipassana or insight meditation, which the West is really kind of robbed of its true depth. This idea of pure observation, the deathless state, the death of the ego, impermanent, unfabricated, unhindered mind, right? Well, that only comes one way, by sharpening your powers of observation, right? Because in Buddhism, it's very action oriented. So if you look at any book that talks about the Pāli Canon, what makes Buddhism radical is the radical notion that maybe God's work, if one believes in God, is done. It's not really Buddha doesn't talk about a Godhead. There might be gods, but they're not worshipped. So, last week we were talking about, this idea of this precious life. Why are we truthful? Why do we practice? Why do I meditate every day for 40 minutes, even when I don't want to, even when it's hard, even though I have radical arthritis in my right hip? Why do I sit on it and do it anyway? Because and again, this isn't for everybody, right? I have a video about this. Not everybody should do what I just described. Okay, so please hear that. Well, this is why. If you go back and you look at the Pāli Canon, the Buddha was really, really clear here. In the suttas at the end of chapter 1, he's talking a bit again about that road to Radhaga. I won't keep repeating it because it was in the last episode and I talked about it before. But it's a sutta really worth reading because he's not exactly mincing words here. There's no easier, softer way. He says, look, this, and it's actually kind of a great story, because he's like, hey, look, a student comes and asks, hey, how do I, it's kind of like a parable, but basically the student's saying, hey, how do I wake up? And Buddha's like, yeah, follow that road. And then it just like stays there, and then the student's either going to follow the road or the student's going to get distracted by something else. And what I find really interesting about Buddhism, and even if you go to there's another book club in here on Chan Buddhism, and I've went to it a couple times, and sadly there's a language barrier there for me because this man has great wisdom, and I wish I could understand more. But he says the same thing. Just pick a path. In the beginning of the book, in the introduction, it talks about how, again, our mind is a fire. And it doesn't have to be Buddhism, but our mind is a bad word show. It really is. And it controls us unless we train it. So having some kind of a path, some kind of a map or framework can be helpful. And so here, that's what I think he's talking about with his son. He's saying, all right, son, you got to sharpen your powers of observation by applying appropriate attention to your actions. That's the Eightfold Path. See right action, see right effort, see right concentration, see right mindfulness. Beginning with the stage when he is intending to act. We already talked about that. Okay. And it's funny because, I coach here and we talk about this, this idea of beginning with the stage when he is intending to act. I was just talking to about this with someone. We were working with this idea of anxiety, and what if you experience anxiety all the time, and maybe that you want to go somewhere, maybe it's a job interview, maybe there's something on your agenda that's really important to you, and you're really, really scared that you're going to bomb it, or you're going to sabotage yourself and not even go because you're so anxious that you feel paralyzed, and that's a really common kind of suffering. Right, that the mind can be very, very painful. And I, as I work with this person, I repeatedly say to this person, nip it in the bud. And that is what is being got out here. The reason why Buddhism is an action program, yes, there's teachings, yes, there's Dhamma, yes, there's Sangha. But there, again, the Buddha doesn't mince words. The Pāli Canon is the oldest document that we know of and he repeats it over and over again. Do it, meditate, do the work. You can't outsource it, But I think that, that's why, it's kind of what he's getting into here with his son. This examination applies to actions in body, speech, and mind. I'm just going to read that again. This examination applies to actions in body, speech, and mind. I think this is why, and I'm just going to check the chat because I get very passionate and oh, well, great. I'm so glad to hear it. Great. Yeah. I was talking about this before, but here, where he says that we're examining our body, speech, and mind. Well, once again, another throwaway statement, right? But if you've ever been to like one of those crazy, and yeah, I'm going to use the word crazy because they are pretty crazy. Wait, I'm going to see if you're still here. Okay, you are. Oh, we have another guest. Hello. Welcome, welcome. And I was explaining, that when you go to a retreat, like for instance, the Goenka retreat, which I would say is in my country at least, is a pretty, very fashionable retreat right now. And, I've been to it and, you're meditating for 9 hours a day. You don't make eye contact. You don't speak. You get up at 4 a.m. You stop eating at noon. In a way, there's very much an aesthetic approach, much like, Gautama put himself through before he became the Buddha. And I think that the reason, when you're going on retreats like that, which, I for one think is a really good idea on a regular basis, I have to assume that's why Nathan has these intensives, is because in this practice, we are working with the body, speech, and mind. Sometimes you can't really get to the nuances of the body, speech, and mind until you've kind of been hanging out in the body and in the mind for a while without your speech, if that makes sense, right? So again, see the 5 aggregates. In fact, I just dropped a video in the same thread today. There was a video that dropped today about the 5 aggregates. And I think if if somebody were to say to me, hey, I'm interested in Buddhism, not the Western version, but actual Buddhism, what would you recommend that I check out? And I would definitely say, hey, do a little research on the 5 aggregates. Because I think sometimes people meditate before they know anything about the 5 aggregates. And so then they don't understand what's happening to them in meditation. And they're like freaking out and like, oh my God, I'm doing this wrong. This is terrible. And am I breaking? And yeah, kind of, but that's not such a bad thing. So I think if you do a little research on the 5 aggregates, then there will be kind of like a theoretical, if you will, framework to help you understand why you're going crazy when you meditate. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm just going to look. Yeah, great. Good. I'm glad you relate. Yes. Monkey mind, right? So the 5 aggregates help us to understand why our mind is a monkey mind. Yeah, and that video is really cool too, that one that just dropped today. Really great video on the 5 aggregates. It's like a podcast, you could just put it on the background and just kind of listen to him talk. I think it's about 38 minutes, and you can just hear him talk about each aggregate, what exactly they meant, what the Buddha meant and they're all going to sound familiar. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's basically called the human condition. Yeah, so this is all in the aggregates. Said the Buddha recommends heedfulness by warning Rahula that if at the stage of intention, he sees that an action would harm himself or others, such an action should absolutely not be done. If at the stage of performing the act, he sees that it is actually causing harm, he should stop then and there. And if after the act is done, he sees that it actually caused harm, then if it was an act in word or deed, he should confess it to his teacher or to his fellow contemplative. If it was an act in thought, he should simply develop a sense of shame. I'm having a trouble with the word shame here, and I'm not going to lie. And anyway, I'll come back to that later and just finish this passage around the act. In both cases, he should then resolve to exercise restraint in the future, i.e. not to repeat the mistake. However, if after reflecting on his action, he saw that it caused no harm, he should take joy in the fact, to sustain his confidence both in himself and in the path, and be heedful to continue training in skillful actions day and night. The element of joy here is important because it's what healthy shame and honor are for, to encourage you to taste the benefits of skillful actions. When you've tasted this joy for yourself, the standards of the wise become your own. Look at that. I didn't even need to take up an issue with shame. I think that my issue was cleared up in this last passage here. I get it. This kind of psychological, what is the function of psychological shame? And so I get what he's saying here. Not like this kind of, shame on you, you're terrible. I get what he's doing here. Okay, I'm just going to check the chat here, make sure I'm not, if there's any questions or, okay, great. Yeah. Okay, great. And this kind of goes back to, this, I'll just say if anybody's listening to this podcast who maybe is coming, there's a lot going on with religion, I realize. There's a lot to unpack, and I never want to insult anyone. It's never my intention to insult. I know for some people, for instance, in my country, Christianity, and Catholicism and Judaism are, they're very salient psychologically. And then you also have a rise of secularism in the United States, of people who actually really don't necessarily, and you have a rise of atheism, which is maybe not even an agnosticism, just kind of a general, I don't really believe in anything. And one of the things that I like about Buddhism, I think, is that, it doesn't really get into, I realize that there are different, and I would even argue that they came later, that kind of bring in more deification. But there's a certain level of just cause and effect, right? Like, if I behave unskillfully, isn't it kind of logical that I'm not going to be received well? There's a certain amount of just duh to Buddhism that I like. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, duh. If you act like a jerk, why would you be surprised that people are treating you like a jerk? But here's the rub. What if you don't know that you're acting like a jerk, right? And that's what's being got at here, right? He's saying, Rahula, you need to sharpen your powers of observation, son. You can't see your own ignorant mind. You can't see that your behavior is creating an effect you don't like. Son, right? He's saying, sharpen your powers of observation. Get off your butt. They didn't have doom scrolling then, but get off your butt. Stop hanging out with your friends. Sit your ass down on the cushion and develop a little bit of observation of your mind. And yeah, it's going to suck. And yeah, you're going to be terrified. That's why it's called slaying the dragon in the hero's journey. If it was easy, it wouldn't be a dragon. You know, so anyway, I'm just going to check one more time, see how we're doing. I don't think I haven't scared you off yet. You're still here. Okay, great. Okay, great. Oh, wait, I see maybe a question. Let me go back. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I can be a very strong, passionate speaker. And I definitely never want anyone to, yeah, it's more because I'm excited and very passionate about Buddhism. I'm yes, it's coming from a good kind of passion, the joy, the nothing but love for you here is where I'm going with that. Okay. So yeah, I'll keep it moving here just a little bit more. So yeah, heedfulness. Right. And so he's basically just saying, hey, you know, get a clue, man. Do some observation, and then you will not be ignorant about your behavior, and then you won't be asking yourself why everybody doesn't want to hang out with you. Right there. There's a modernized version of that story. However, if after I already talked about that. Okay. So the reference to a wise friend to whom Rahula can confess his misdeeds and possibly ask for advice on how not to repeat them shows the second role of an admirable friend in developing these supplementary qualities. Someone you trust not to condemn you for your mistakes, but to give wise recommendations instead. So this sounds familiar. You know, if you're a Catholic, wow, right? Doesn't this sound like confession? So, you know, I love this idea that there are aspects of great wisdom traditions that they share these same ideas. And I put a lot of confidence in the history of human cognition that there must, if we can all coalesce around some of these kind of like universal principles, you know, then there must be a reason for it. And, you know, I love this idea that I'm a secular Buddhist. Okay. So, you know, I don't, you know, and in Buddhism, in the Sangha, you know, we don't confess to one another. That's not the nature of a Sangha in Buddhism. Okay. The Sangha is not like a church. It doesn't really serve the same role. In Buddhism, we don't really look to people outside of ourselves. We kind of look to and Buddhism is very much an inside job. The Sangha, other people are there to serve as what we're talking about right now, your admirable friend. Okay, they're not really, their function is not to tell you what to do. In fact, this idea of if you meet the Buddha, kill him, that's what that means. That we must find this for ourselves through our own meditation practice, through following the path. You can't outsource it. No one can do the work for you. You can't buy it for $99.99, right? You got to do the work yourself. It's an inside job. So, you know, if you go back and you kind of look at, you know, what is this notion of the admirable friend? As for the primary elements, an admirable friendship, an admirable person worth emulating on the one hand, and the desire to emulate him or her on the other. Doesn't portray the Buddha in terms of all the qualities to look for in an admirable friend, excuse me, but it does show how him exemplifying one of them, his discernment, he illustrates his points with vivid similes appropriate to Rahula's age, and he manages to impart in a few brief instructions on how to learn from one's mistakes several important Dhamma lessons. Oh my gosh, this is just delightful. To begin with, by telling Rahula to gauge his actions by his intentions. You know, all right, that's it. Just drop the mic right now. Episode over. There's really nothing else to say. I mean, seriously, look at this. Just think about what this means, right? To gauge your actions by your intent. So anytime anybody ever gives me, I'm just going to say it for effect, not to offend, anytime anybody that I know in my life gives me shit for meditating every day, I can go back and I can say, this is why. When you don't know your mind, you don't know your intentions. You don't know your intentions. I actually just dropped a video about this on LinkedIn. one of the really interesting and cool things that I think is AI is going to bring to humanity. It's already bringing it because I'm already using it this way, and I'm just another bozo on this bus. So if I'm doing it, about 2 gazillion other people are doing it too. Right? This idea that here's how I use AI, right? Let's say that I get triggered. Now, I meditate every day, and I do follow the Eightfold Path, and that means that I try to stay very, very mindful about, in Buddhism, what is called Shempa, or the things that trigger my ego. Ego identification in Buddhism, okay? Shempa, clinging. So how do you know when you've been hooked? Well, your ego's pricked, right? You get self-righteous. Right? Or you feel the need to be better, to try to somehow be more powerful than them, make them small, bully them, right? Now, this might be happening very subtly, and you don't even realize that you're doing it, but what your body knows is that you're not feeling so good, which is why you keep doing it. But the reason why we don't really know that we're doing that is because we're not awake. We're not aware. We're asleep. We're not coherent. We have not been training in the mind. So here, when he says, to begin with, son, to begin with, son, gosh darn, Buddha, will you be my dad? To begin with, son, try gauging your actions by why you're really doing it. That's what an intention is. What's really going on? You trying to get something for yourself? You sure you're being mindful? You sure you're being skillful? You know, one of the 12-step programs that I belong to is called Al-Anon, and there's a great slogan in that program: helping isn't helping. So what does that mean? How I came to interpret it, when was it's very Buddhist in a way. It's like, sorry, I do a lot of pregnant pauses, but I really am thinking, I promise. And let me see if you're saying anything too, because I love to talk with people on here. Oh wait, let me see what you said. That's right. Let me give you a for instance. Okay, this is a really easy reach, and this is a hard pill to swallow that I realize could make me unpopular, but I'm just the messenger. Let's say that I have a really good friend, and my really good friend is a drug addict, and I go over to my really good friend's house one day, and they just blew their last couple bucks or whatever on whatever their drug of choice is. When I say drug, I don't just mean like, it could be porn. I mean, those are all drugs in my view. It's in Buddhism, they're all the same. It's all clinging. It's all clinging, suffering, clinging, the wheel. So intention, right? So let's say that I go over there and my friend's like, oh man, you just give me $20, man. You really got to give me $20. You got to give me $20. Now, you love your friend. You don't want to see your friend in pain, and you can see that your friend's in pain. You can see that your friend really wants whatever they want. And but there's more to it than that people don't like to look at. You don't want your friend to not like you anymore. You don't want to risk your friend abandoning you. You don't want to risk losing your friend. See, this is the hard dragon part that this is when they get off the mat. When they don't want to look at their ego. Because they don't want to look at it. They don't want to admit where they've been wrong. Right? Who wants to admit when they've been wrong? This is how radical Buddhism is. That's why I said this sentence right here is so radical, because what intention means in Buddhism is pretty hardcore, right? So my friend is begging me for money. But in Buddhism, the real compassionate thing to do would be to say no. I love you, no. I love you, no. I love you, no. No, even though you might not like me anymore. No, even though I may have lost you as a friend. Because my intention is to help you, my love. To really help you, my love. So I hope that makes sense. This is the really, really, really radical nature of Buddhism. Yes, this is ego too. And there's many, many, many a great thinker and philosopher who have written about this. Is is giving really giving? And I don't even want to get into that. I think for me, I'm Buddhist, so for me, it's more about what is being said here. It's more about, look, I know that I have an ego. If I didn't have an ego and I wasn't a jackass, then I wouldn't even be here on this ball anymore. I'd be like, I don't know, whatever happens when you wake up, I guess. So I know I'm a jackass. So my job is to keep remembering that I'm a jackass and to keep practicing and always checking in. What are my intentions? So kind of going back earlier to how I use AI. Well, I've been using AI as an intention checker as a Buddhist. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. So I talk about this a lot in my podcast, that I have a really bad temper. It's much better, because I've been practicing so long. But Buddhism doesn't make hard things go away. It just helps you to deal with them better. So my anger, I don't know, in the supernatural version of Buddhism, it means that this is my karma is ripening. I've been a scrappy, not to be trifled with person since I came out of my mom's womb. Okay, so I don't know what's going on there. So for me, my job, as a Buddhist, knowing that this is my karma ripening, if you believe in the supernatural elements. So what's my job? Well, my job is to make sure that anger, that kind of fabricated state, plus I also come from high trauma. And so, I can get into a fight or flight. Even though I've done a lot of work, if you push me far enough, you will regret it. So there's lots of things to work with for me here, right? We all have things, none of us would be here if we were awake. So to my mind, you have to get to those harder questions. This is why parents let their kids sleep in their basement when they're 30. Well, the parent's not actually being compassionate. Not really. If their kid is living in the basement and isn't doing anything to kind of like have purpose, then letting their kid go on and on like that is actually not compassionate. But the reason why they're letting their kid do that is because they don't want to lose their kid's love. They don't want to be the bad guy. They want to be seen as good. But that's not how we do it in Buddhism. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does. Okay. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's just kind of a particular approach. That's just kind of a particular approach to doing things. By telling Rahula to gauge his actions not only by his intentions but also by their results, right? Because cause and effect, right? So we're looking at, well, how did it land? Right? If I say something to someone and I can see in their eyes that they look devastated, clearly I did something wrong. But the only way for me to be able to see that I've hurt someone, I've harmed someone, is for me to be there, to show up, to be embodied, to be present. And that only happens through practicing meditation, right? So that's why in the Eightfold Path, you need all of the 8 stones, So he says he is making the point that mere well-meaning intentions, we just talked about this, it doesn't matter how well-meaning, you have to look at the results, the potentiality for result, right? The potentiality for result. And this can be very hard for women, I think. I'm a very masculine woman, but so this is my opinion from a woman who is a very masculine woman. I served in the army. I'm a very masculine chick. I know how to fight. I'm a very masculine chick. I box. I find this is something that I talk about a lot with my women friends who are parents. This is a really hard pill for them to swallow. He is making the point that mere well-meaning intentions are not enough to be skillful. We owe it to the people that we care about in our lives to not be people pleasers. I think another thing that I think the West has done to Buddhism has really not explained to people what the Buddhist definition of compassion is. The West has given it their definition. But from what I've seen in the West, it bears very little resemblance to the actual Buddhist definition of compassion. And what he's talking about right here is the radical Buddhist way of compassion. That you do the hard thing. You do the hard thing. And it might mean that they don't like you anymore. And it might mean, I've lost a lot of friends. I just had to lose a friend actually because I kept trying to set very, very psychologically healthy boundaries that would be healthy in any relationship with any emotionally intelligent, functioning human. They were boundaries that were wise. They were boundaries that were grounded and centered in self-compassion and compassion. And this was a person that just could not or would not honor my boundaries. Now, I don't need to get mad. That's not what we do in Buddhism, right? What we do instead is just with loving compassion. I just said, I love you, and you just can't be in my sphere of influence anymore. And that was that. Now, in some traditions, that would be considered unfeeling, unkind. No. It's this. It's what we're talking about right here. How is my enabling someone who can't honor a boundary helping them to grow? Helping them to be healthy in relationships? All I'm doing is basically encouraging them to be an asshole, right? That's how Buddhists see it, so sorry about the A-bomb there. And it hurts to lose so much, and it kicks in profound. If you go back and you look at earlier sections, right last week, actually, the 2 pages before this, the Pāli Canon, Buddha uses a couple of words that are really, really critical. Terror. That's a strong word. And he doesn't really drop words that are that kind of hyperbolic and dramatic very often. So what that says to me, that the Buddha, who much more operates on logos throughout the Pāli Canon than on ethos, that he would drop a word like terror. I think that he's like I cuss for effect. I think what he did it for effect. He's saying that feeling that you described here, where you said, and it hurts. That hurt can feel devouring, like you're dying, like you're gonna die. And I think that it takes a lot of courage to sit through it. And that's the radical Buddhism. The backbone of Buddhism is ethics. Ethics. And that's what makes it really, really different from Hinduism. Not saying that Hinduism doesn't have ethics, but Hinduism doesn't make the backbone of the practice the individual's dedication to ethics, to treating people well. Even when it doesn't look compassionate, doesn't mean it isn't compassionate. So what I think it asks the practitioner to do, and this is Al-Anon 101. This is basically what Al-Anon is all about. Al-Anon is for, Al-Anon as a 12-step program is for people who are maybe were raised by, or married to, or parenting someone who's an addict. Maybe they're addicted to alcohol, to drugs, fill in the blank. And the whole Al-Anon program is basically what is being talked about right here in this little passage. Your helping isn't helping. If you really want to love someone, then sometimes, and that includes yourself, right? And a good way to think about this for me is think about what our own mind does in relationship to taking care of ourselves. And this is a really fun contemplation that you can do sometimes, or maybe a journal exercise that you can do sometimes. If you're ever in a situation where you have to ask yourself, like the Buddha is asking his son to do here, am I helping or am I helping? If you catch my drift. And, anyway, I'm going off the rails. Oh, I see that you're writing. I also see that I have 10 more minutes, so. Okay, great. All right. So I think I know I go on and on, but I'm gonna keep on reading a little bit because I just saw the time. Okay. Oh, look at that. See, look. I should have just kept reading and not talked, because now he's just gonna say what I just said, and much better than I say it. Yeah, skillfulness requires that they also have to be based on. Oh, wait, don't gloss over that, Sarah. What are you doing? Back it up the truck. Okay, let me just read that whole section again, because it's awesome. By telling Rahula to gauge his actions not only by his intentions, but also by their results, He is making the point that mere well-meaning intentions are not enough to be skillful. Here comes the rub. Skillfulness requires that they also have to be based on lack of delusion as to their consequences. What? Whoa. So, another great way to think about this. And maybe someone would, let's say that I'm a parent and I have a child who's a heroin addict, right? And I've been enabling them by giving them money because I love them and I just want them to be free from suffering. But I've actually been enabling their addiction, right? So here, I'm going to go back. Let me just read this last little section. What he's saying is that part of being skillful, and by the way, skillfulness, the compassion's kind of wrapped up in, it's all kind of compassion in Buddhism. Part of being skillful is seeing when your quote unquote helping is delusional and is actually leading to more suffering for the person that you're purporting to quote unquote help. So I hope that makes sense. Once again, this demands radical honesty from us. Again, go back and look at truthfulness. Why the Buddha would not even work with students who weren't willing to be truthful. What's the point? If you're not willing to be truthful with yourself, then you can't be taught. You're unteachable, right? So there's kind of like that. There's that edge in Buddhism again. That edge. You'll see it all over the place. Just check and see how we're doing down there. Okay, great. By telling Rahula to judge the results of his actions both while he is doing them and after they are done, he is preparing Rahula to grasp the basic principle of causality that lies at the basis of fabrication. Fabrication is a really important term in Buddhism, just so you know. The fabricated state. So that's definitely a very key term. Like if you're interested in Buddhism, you could check out, what the heck does that even mean, fabrication? What are they talking about? That lies at the basis of which states in essence that experience, well, here it comes. It's going to tell you again right here what fabrication is. In essence, that experience, our individual subjective experience is comprised of a complex interaction of the results of past actions combined with present actions and their results. So you can look at this from a more, the traditional, and not traditional, I mean, the Buddhist philosophy, right? That we incarnate, that, our karma is like, a living thing that seeds bud and ripen. And this is a very kind of, and this is not a judgment, this is just like, I'm just kind of saying, this is a very supernatural kind of, the idea is we keep coming back to planet Earth after we've died. And really how we reincarnate is contingent upon what I just said here, right? What I like to say for people that are more secular is that you can even look at this in this lifetime. So if I was to go back and look at, I'm just going to put this in context here. Past actions. Okay, so I'll do like an analogy. So I'm in a job, say. This has actually happened to me, and I had to really bring my practice to it. I had a job where I wasn't taking care of myself, right? So I started to I started to slowly over time, it's like the fish in the boiling water, right? Over time, or whatever that saying is, I started to become less, and I started to notice myself becoming less mindful, more unskillful. And, the heat was kind of getting turned up on that feeling in me. So I started to kind of, act out. And then I would come to work, and notice that like maybe people were treating me differently. And then it would just kind of feed like this negative momentum of I'm not behaving well. People are responding to how I'm behaving, right? Energetically, right? When people are kind of grouchy and short and impatient and bleh, right? Well, people are going to respond to that. Usually they're not thrilled, right? And if you keep behaving that way, well, now they see a pattern in you. Now when they see you, they just see your pattern. So now you've created momentum, you know? So I think that can be a really great way to look at basically what he's saying here is karma, but like in this lifetime, if that can kind of becomes more accessible. At the same time, the Buddha teaches Rahula the three qualities that are essential to right mindfulness. Mindfulness in keeping in mind at all times the appropriate questions to ask about his actions. Alertness in examining his intentions and the results of his actions. And ardency in the desire to keep training day and night in skillful qualities in body, speech, and mind. And wow, that sounds like the life of a monastic to me. I don't know enough about I didn't realize, maybe this is where I'm very ignorant, maybe they were living a monastic life. I honestly don't know. This idea of doing it day and night is not something a lay Buddhist would do. But yeah, this is, however, regardless of whether you're a monastic or you're a lay Buddhist, I mean, this is why we practice every day. This is why we do meditate every day. Most people who follow the Eightfold Path will have a very devoted and very intentional, meditation practice. It's, and when I use the word rigorous, what I mean by that is you sit no matter how you're feeling. It doesn't matter how you're feeling. Feelings are one of the 5 aggregates. Just sit. Just sit and be in the fire of your mind. I mean, that's the practice. The Buddha's skill and discernment as a teacher is displayed in the way he can convey all these lessons, in the way he frames a few brief questions to his son. As for the motivation to emulate an admirable friend, the Buddha's instructions to Rahula highlight an emotion that is poorly understood, and rarely appreciated at present. The emotion of shame. Remember did you see how it even stuck in my craw? That word, gave me the willies. This is not and this is why I had a problem with it. See, and this is, thank you for answering my question, Bhikkhu. This is not the debilitating shame. That's the opposite of self-esteem. See, that's what I thought he was talking about. Yeah, screw that kind of shame. Instead, it's the healthy shame. Yes, it's the healthy shame. That's the opposite of shamelessness and accompanies a high sense of personal honor, of self-respect. I love that. It's healthy in that it spurs you to act in a skillful way and to find joy in being skillful. In this way, the shame the Buddha recommends is a corollary of high rather than low self-esteem. If there is nothing that I think Westerners get more wrong about Buddhism, it's this. It's a mark of honor in the best sense of the word. Here. You know what? I'm done. That's it. I want to leave it right there. I can't think of a better place to leave this week's reading. I know it's is this a daily thing? Well, meditation for me is a daily thing. And I think that you'll find that most people who practice Buddhism would say that, yes, they do have a daily meditation. I don't know, I actually don't know anybody who actually practices, actually would consider themselves to be a Buddhist who practices, follows the Eightfold Path, who doesn't have a daily meditation practice. But, it's not, again, I think you'll hear in this server, that people come to meditation for lots of different reasons. Not everybody is looking for what I'm looking for, which is kind of like, some people just want to feel better. Like, man, I feel like crap. Where I get a little bent out sometimes is, when people present, the feel-good aspects of Buddhism without also letting people know, hey, there's more to it than that, and find out more here. And that's something that I really love about Meditation Mind. it honors where the term mindfulness comes from, which is from Buddhism. It's one of the stones in the Eightfold Path. So, healthy shame. Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. So this is actually where I ended it. I kind of spent some time at the end of the book club this week talking to someone who was interested to find out more. But thank you so much for joining, and really appreciate your listening to the podcast if you are. And be sure to take a look at Meditation Mind's website, which is all in the description here. And yeah, visit their Discord server if you want to continue the conversation. It's a really rich, very inclusive Discord server. We all come together with a common hobby, a common shared enthusiasm for meditation. So yeah, thanks again. Be well.